Welcome to the Young Crones Cafe, where you can get a magic brew full of all sorts of information, both witchy and practical.
Grab a cup of coffee and join us. I'm Elizabeth, a wordsmith.
And I'm Dave, a modern-day sage.
We are going to talk about various witchcraft and life topics from a slightly more mature perspective, at least most of the time.
Thanks for joining us.
Today's metaphysical kernel of thought is group mind. If you are blessed to practice with a group of like-minded people, and it is a positive experience, the group may actually develop what is often referred to in witchcraft circles as an egregore or group mind. This fancy word has often had negative connotations because it comes from the Greek word for watchers, and the idea was that it was some type of spirit that was created by a group for a specific magical purpose seemed ominous. However, this is not how those of us on the path view what we call our group mind, or how we developed it in the first place. By practicing together using the same symbols and correspondences, and discovering how we comprehend the various energies we work with, we have learned how to link together to create rituals and spells that allow us to grow spiritually in ways we never thought possible. For example, we use the same circle cast in most of our rituals that require one. Both of us know exactly what we are doing when we use it, the words are the same, and our brains have learned that we are creating a space to work magic within. One of us casts and the others lend their energy and support to the process, but we are interchangeable in terms of who does what. When your group is in sync this way, you strengthen the creation of your group mind, which enhances the ritual experience for everyone involved. A group mind is not necessary for a group to successfully practice together, nor is it something you can force into existence by using personal desire or strength of will. It develops naturally over time through working together, and it either happens through developed personal connections or it doesn't. It can be seen as a bonus of your group practice. However, we don't limit our practice to group work. Each of us has an individual spiritual practice as well. Sometimes what each of us does is similar to the other, but often we pursue our own interests and what enhances our own personal growth and development in very different ways.
Hey, Dave.
Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
Oh, good. Enjoying the blue. Our readers could see you. You're in the middle of editing Dallas Blue, though it's a little early for football season.
Well, as soon as we get the YouTube channel up, I'm gonna have my avatar modeled to have the beard and the hairstyle that I wear anyway. So it'll become. I should say I will become even more of a caricature of myself.
I'm hoping to do the same in my own inimitable grandmotherly type way. You know,
It's good to be getting back into some rhythm too. That's why I re-dyed the hair, and I'm trying to get myself psyched up to hit the ground running next week. So, what are we talking about today?
The concept of group mind that seems to be a feature of some people's practices and not others. As it says in the reading, that fancy Greek word egregore seems to get bandied around a lot, which actually comes from the Greek and it stands for watchers. And I don't think that's necessarily an appropriate use of the word, but that seems to be what sticks for a lot of people. But the idea is if you practice with people you're comfortable with over a period of time and you kind of develop the same symbolic language, I guess. Like if
Right.
I say, a certain word when we're practicing together with someone that you practiced for a while, they will know what you're talking about and have the same definition or concept or meaning for it. And it just seems to enhance your practice that way.
Sure. And when I first did this reading and caught the word egregore there, to me, I see so many different examples of different ways of representing that community.
Mm-hmm.
It can be, or I've often talked about congregation.
Yeah.
I've often talked about, and not necessarily in a Christian context,
No.
but there is something about us as human beings, and even some of the greater primates, that a regular gathering of an extended group of people, so that there can be things like accountability and sharing, and you learn each other's words and things like that. So yeah, you could call it a clutch or a congregation or a community or what have you. I think saying that what you're talking about here, group mind wise, is something more than just that collection or group of commonly thinking and speaking individuals. It sounds to me like what you're talking about is sort of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts kind of thing.
I think so. That is a very good way to put it, because when you all have that same, it's almost like super focused intent. So if you're working, if you're doing a ritual, and I use the example of a circle cast, we use the same words. So the words have I want to use the word imprinted almost on each of our brains in that respect, that when we hear these words, we know that we're creating that bubble. And for us, it's not a circle, it's a bubble, because it's above and below as well. But it's a container for working magic in. And
even as simple as, our own self-spoken mantras and things like that, after you have said those words enough time and recognized that affect or that feeling or what have you, they become magic words.
Exactly.
And in those cases, two people are very common when they get together, are going to share that with other people. And that's what we all are, is sort of a collection of those things that we've figured out and those things that we have come across other people in how they've figured it out.
Exactly. I would agree completely. And I think, too, you were mentioning congregations. There's kind of a sameness to some churches in the way they worship. They have the same order of service, or like Catholic Mass. There is a certain commonality, common features that are the same every single time, the same words, the same so on, that creates that greater meaning for people.
Sure, absolutely. It's a celebration or a worship, but it's in a ritualized, structured format. So, one of my notes here was talking about, and I'll end up coming back around to this in our closing, but we each always are going to be walking our own path.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also groups that we can get together and we can relate to a common dance. People sort of know the hokey pokey. People sort of know that when you go to a Catholic Mass, there's going to be certain steps where you're going to take different physical postures.
Yes.
So even though we are aware of and sometimes share those things that we do together, we still have our own path. It's the act of coming together and the energy we put into that coming together that I think is the net energy for this thing that is greater than the group of us.
I think so. Than our individual. It's when we each put our individual bits into it that it creates that group. And
right.
Shared common experience. Like I said, if taking it a bit further, if you go to Catholic Mass every Sunday, if that happens to be your thing, like you said, the postures and you know what's going to happen, and that part of it becomes almost second nature.
Sure.
So that you can focus on, the priest with his sermon, for instance, or
your own divine experience. Absolutely.
Exactly. And it improves it and enhances it, because it's got that background of familiarity. It's almost like putting yourself into a meditative state when you think about it.
Well, and I just wanted to inject there, because I can remember experiences where I had my own thing that I wanted to do internally, but you and Sue had circles set up and cast, and there were times when I would join in with your circle during a ritual, but then sort of sit off and not necessarily be part of what you were doing, and yet sharing that swirling, that that bubble or that vortex of energy, and finding that I could get farther in my own practice within that space than I could out on my own. And so I think in a way, at times I was tapping into that group mind, or that greater than the group of you two. I think I was tapping into that energy.
I would not be at all surprised. And you used to laugh at how the two of us would start finishing each other's sentences when we got going, talking about magic or ritual or whatever. Because
sure. I mean, Susie used to refer to it as the collective, which was her brain, you, and your brain, and it was always at least 5 of you. But yeah, you would get in sync, and you would be finishing other sentences, but also you would synergize a lot. And the reason I say that is because there were times when one of you would be lower energy and the other would be carrying that sort of bus or that sort of focus to keep each other, and always, again, uplifted by the energy that was created beyond what you and she added.
I think so, yeah. And I think that's more than anything else what we talk about when we talk about group mind. It's very difficult sometimes to explain this, or to talk about this stuff if you haven't experienced it. And as we say in the reading, if it happens, great. If it doesn't make your practice or your work with a group of people any less.
No, it's purely in my point of view anyway, it's purely a bonus, in that if I was Desert Island, me and the universe would be fine. But while I am not Desert Island, why not share and grow and evolve as a person?
Yes, exactly. And I think it's important for people to recognize that is a real possibility if you are a walker on any sort of spiritual path.
Go ahead.
We all have our own experiences, and that's important. But isn't it cool sometimes as you're walking along, if you discover somebody might have experienced at least some of the stuff you did too?
Sure, absolutely. And one of the last notes that I have here was, it's funny how you can compare all of this in a different context, but a band of musicians. There is more than the 3 of us or 4 of us or 5 of us here. There is the call and response and interaction between layers of jazz where, there's an ebb and flow to what you are building, almost like watching a flame move around. And I'm reminded by that as well, that just like sometimes I tend to get too solitary in my spiritual practices, I've been playing musical instruments down here in my basement for quite some time, since I've had another musician or 2 or 3 to play with. So maybe this week's lesson in talking about group mind was a way to show me that I become more of a player when I am playing among other players.
Which makes a great deal of sense. And I love the analogy of jazz, because yes, it creates a group sound when you are playing a piece, but jazz is also about improvisation and solos.
Sure. Nobody knows where this is going to go, but everyone is going to I don't want to use the word follow, because you're not, but you are involving yourself in it, in your energy.
Yeah, I think so. And everybody gets a chance to shine in their own way. Right. If I love watching people perform jazz, because you never know, like you said, where it's going. And if they're really good musicians, they are able to support who's ever stepped forward temporarily to be the soloist.
Sure. Or when someone does something new and interesting, you realize that, they surprised all 3 of themselves, even the guy who did it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a lot of fun to watch. And I think that's the best part about being a part of a group mind, if you experience it, is the improvisations that show up, I guess is the best word.
Sure. To agree, it's just a different format of energy surfing.
I think so.
You're kind of riding that. And here again, we each walk our own path, and then we relate to those common dances that we know amongst those that we practice around.
I think so. And it just makes life better, I think. Being aware
Absolutely.
we have options all the time.
Well, and group mind can be applied to a lot of things. I mean, sporting teams, fan bases.
Mm,
Not for nothing, you would consider that the Young Crones Cafe is a group mind.
yes, in that respect. And so are kids who play video games together, over the internet, and they have groups that meet up on Tuesday night at 8 o'clock to play whatever. But the idea is you're actually relating. It requires too that you actually relate to people and talk to them,
Sure.
and recognize that they're just as much, they're entitled to their opinions and how they view things. And it's amazing what you can learn from people like that.
Well, and that's why I say, while we're each walking our own path, that doesn't mean we can't rub against other people and see what their path is like.
Oh, exactly. And that's always fun because you can get to some interesting debates that way.
Right.
Let us be honest about that.
Well, yeah, group mind has its own aspect of chaos.
Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with a little chaos here and there. Maybe not as a permanent solution to things, but at least it keeps life interesting.
Absolutely.
Mhm. I could use a little less chaos. I don't mind if I have a little chaos in my spiritual practices, but could I get a little less chaos in the day-to-day to balance that out? But that doesn't seem to be the way life works most of the time. So we'll just talk that, put that one to wishful thinking and keep it moving after that statement.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But is there anything you would like to add about group mind?
Nope. I think we pretty well covered it.
I think so. This one's kind of short, but we also want Dave to build up his energy again. And I don't want to,
We're working on it.
Here we are. So with that being said, as we always say to each other and to all of you in our community of like-minded people, may you find mirth and reverence in all things.
Be safe, be kind, and be loved.
Practices of the path. These are the hows and whats that we, as practitioners on the path, actually do in our own lives. Everything from the various tools that we work with, as well as those we don't and why, to the solar and lunar cycles, herbs we use, crystals and stones that we work with, candles, incenses, and anything else we come up with that can give an understanding of what we personally do with our magical practices.
Yeah.
Yes, and today I figured we'd talk about potential types of magic you can use in spell work, because there's a lot of them. There's a whole bunch of different definitions out there, and these are kind of the ones we have distilled it down to as best we can over the years.
Sure. And they're not all inclusive or all exclusive either. I mean, there's some overlap between them, but I like the list that you and Sue were able to break down. I think this comes right out of the Practical Magic of the Path book, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it does, because I think people need to be aware that there's a whole bunch of types you can use, and you can always mix and match and combine them too, which is the nice part. You're not limited. So say you want to do, I don't know, elemental magic. You're not limited to just using elemental magic. You can combine it with all sorts of things if you want.
So I guess, as is often your habit, we'll start off with some definitions. How's that sound?
I like it.
All right. Straight from the Practical Magic of the Path book. Potential types of magic to use in spell work. Over thousands of years of human history, there have been many different types of magic that people have used for all sorts of reasons. Some fit better with a particular purpose of a spell, so knowing some of the options is always beneficial. These types can include
Ta-da! Candle magic. It's one of the simplest forms of magic, obviously. All you need to do is place your intent into a candle and light it. You can enhance this magic with the use of various colors, shapes, and scents for correspondences. I think this is one of the first types of magic a lot of witches try, or that we're taught to do.
Absolutely.
Because it's simple. I mean, you light the candle, you think about what you need to do, you light the candle, and you don't even have to really have the color because white always works, you know, and you just go for it and it's done. You leave it alone.
And on that topic, you know, I'm a big believer in colors and correspondences and whatnot, but trumping that, I'm also a bigger believer in it's not the color of the candle, it's the magic in the flame.
I think so.
Oh, when I come across something that says I'm supposed to use a blue candle, well, you know, if I've got a blue candle, great. But if the closest I've got is yellow, then yellow is going to work for me. I can always tie a little blue ribbon around it or write on it with a blue marker or set it on a blue candle holder or a mat. Anything to combine and associate that sort of thing. But as I say, I'm a big believer in it's the magic in the flame.
I think so.
So next we have color magic, incidentally, which is used most often in conjunction with other forms of magic as correspondences to amplify the effects of the original form. Writing with a particular color of ink or even on colored paper and create a spell in itself.
Mm-hmm. And as you know, to piggyback onto that, I have been known on occasion, if I have something important going on, to wear a particular color.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's just in my underwear, because I have a certain color, you know, why not? Anything that enhances what I'm doing. And color magic by itself can be fun. Sue used to have different colored sticky notes and notes written in green and blue and yellow and pink all over the house.
And I sit here with one of those fabulous artifacts from our childhood. It's one of the old 4-color pens.
Oh, please, yes.
And I use those constantly, not only in writing, but in writing magic. Because, sure, if I'm going to do a prosperity spell, it just sort of makes sense that I've got green right there in my holster.
Exactly. And I am sitting here literally with all different colored gel pens in my pencil holder. So
right, yeah, you have a rather spectrum there.
Yeah, I do on occasion. But
speaking of having a spectrum of colors, you and your stones.
Yes, crystal and gemstone magic is special because each stone has its own magical properties and unique vibrations that can be used to enhance or create a spell. They can be carried in your pocket, worn as a talisman, or kept on an altar to manifest or result, or as a touchstone reminder of the magic created. Yeah, I'm the one whose purse clinks when she walks, and is probably a lethal weapon if I swung it at somebody, because there's always a bunch of various rock stones, crystals, gemstones, whatever you want to call them. I just tend to think of them as rocks because that's what they say they are. Yes, they talk to me. We're going to leave that one alone because that's just my own thing. Maybe not. I'm sure there's other people out there. I'd love to hear if anybody out there talks to rocks and has them talk back like I do.
So here's an interesting anecdote that I can share with you about that. The very first book that I can remember my mother ever gifting to me was a book called Hello Rock.
Okay.
And in the first page, there was a drawing of a little boy who had picked up a stone, and his line was, Hello Rock. On the next page, it was, Gee, you're a pretty rock. Is this rock your mother? Are these rocks your friends? So the very first book that I ever owned and held in my own hands was a book called Hello Rock.
Oh, that's
I don't remember the history or the author or any of that. If somebody wants to try to find that, but it was a little, maybe 8-inch by 8-inch square hardcover children's book, and it was the book that got me started on reading.
Well, there you go, and you'll get a kick out of this. Sue and I, we created our Crafting a Magical Life book, and one of the things we did was create stones that you could use to mark like the 4 quarters if you were outside.
Mm-hmm.
So and the center. So they have kind of the, an air symbol and an earth symbol and so on them. And they live on my windowsill here. My 2-year-old granddaughter comes to visit. And I get, hi, Grandma, rocks.
Right.
The only thing she wants, there's stuff all over my house that you could get into because she's a 2-year-old. And
Right.
I'm sorry, I don't live with 2-year-olds, so my house is not exactly as childproof as it could have been. It's the only thing she wants to play with, hours on end. She lines them up on the bed. She walks around with them. She shows them to people. Her father asks, can I have one? She's like, no, my rocks.
How special is that she has that experience with her grandma, the witch's rocks? That's
Yeah.
cool.
And so there we are. Okay.
Very cool.
Moving on.
Divination magic may not be technically be considered a type of magic, but its ability to demonstrate potential paths for you can make it so, especially if you are working to create a spell. You can also use a card from a deck on your altar to represent a type of energy that you are using in spell work. And this is something that I find the Witchstone's Oracle deck is super, super handy for, because the way the two of you developed it, it has all 4 of the elements. It has all 4 of the cardinal directions. It has all 4 of the seasons, all 4 of the moon phases. So it's almost as if I have a set of flashcards where in a pinch, okay, I need north, there's north. I need air, there's air. And you can literally use that deck as sort of a magical toolkit.
Kind of cool. I don't think we intentionally planned that out, but I think the universe was kind of guiding us anyway when we created it. So maybe the universe said, okay, people, you weren't thinking of it this way, but now you got a magical toolkit too. So I'll take it.
Well, and I found it interesting in the reading there. I hadn't, I guess I do it all the time. I just hadn't realized that I was doing it, but I can divine to find guidance on how best to write a spell that may not necessarily be a divination spell, but this is absolutely right, because when I'm sitting down to write a spell for something, I will ask the universe, what do I need to cover in this spell and what not necessarily is not within the scope or whatever. Mm-hmm. So really, I think in a lot of our creative processes, including that of writing spells or rituals, I think while we are performing that process, we are almost invariably using some sort of divination magic as we go along. It's how we write.
Oh, please, yes. I've been known. I have a deck of cards that are personal to me that I tend to pull when I'm stuck writing ritual or spell work or whatever, and it seems to give me the oomph or a direction that I hadn't considered that suddenly makes sense. So there we are. All right. Dream magic. It's often considered one of the most difficult forms of magic to work with for many witches. Most of us don't remember complete dreams, but bits and pieces that may be messages from our unconscious or not. Lucid dreaming is a learned skill, which is what people talk about, I think, most often when they're considering dream magic, which is where an individual works to control a dream and create a desired outcome. Apparently, you are able to say, okay, I know I'm dreaming. And you know you're in the dream. And usually dreams kind of happen to people. But lucid dreaming is apparently a skill that some people have where they recognize they're dreaming and then can change the course of the dream that they're in.
Right. I find for me that's a real rare circumstance that I actually recognize that I'm in the dream while I'm in the dream. But for me, dream magic kind of resolves into what I consider passive and active.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what that means is when I woke up this morning, I tried to take a quick note of those couple of things that I remembered dreaming about. And this is a passive act because I'm just remembering what I did dream. But that helps give me some key and some focus as to something that my subconscious might be chewing on or some issues that I'm pondering even when I'm not aware that I'm pondering. So I use that sort of as an indicator of how my mind in the body, mind, soul trinity is working.
Mm-hmm.
And then with active dreaming, and this is something that I've only practiced with for a few months, and I'm having some result, but it's hard to know what's coincidence and what result at this point for me. But there are times when before I go to bed, I will meditate for a few minutes and consciously choose, tonight I would like to dream about, or I feel that I need to dream about, say Sue, for example, or I would like to dream about, I need some advice. And so there are both genealogically ancestral and metaphysically ancestral entities that I call out to for guidance.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, last night when I went to bed, I said I need some grandfather dreams. I need some advice on my current course and stuff like that. And I did remember dreaming about, this morning I remembered dreaming about some of those grandfather figures. It's, as I say, it's hard to tell whether or not I'm just implanting that thought or not, but it's working for me. So, as I say, there's what did I dream about, and there's I would consciously and intentionally hope to dream about X.
Okay. I don't remember dreams. If I
Right,
do,
right. I think that goes along with your aphantasia.
I was thinking the same thing. That's part of it. I literally don't see things. So if I'm dreaming, I probably dream differently. Who knows?
Right,
Not something I've really contemplated. It's not something I terribly stress about.
right.
You know, once every blue moon, literally, I'll get a sense of, I'll wake up and something important comes to mind that I have no idea where it came from. So maybe that's the same thing like when you wake up and remember things, but I have no clue.
Sure.
You know?
That it could be as something as, you've just woken up, so you're open to precognition.
Who knows?
Right.
Okay.
So next we have elemental magic.
Mm-hmm.
This is based on the concept that each element has its own specific properties that can be used separately or combined together to work magic, especially manifestation, or to provide the energy for spell work. Make sure to ask if they are willing to work with you and not make a demand. Politeness counts when working with energies that are very different from you.
Oh, yeah.
I've had opportunity even recently to practice some elemental magic, in that my sweetie and I were putting up the summer awning the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And we had asked for a fairly calm morning, and we had a fairly calm morning, but then the wind started to gust up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So we set everything in the yard and put a couple of rocks on it, and we sat for a few minutes, and we just listened to the breeze in the trees and listened to the different sounds of the wind and sort of talked to it. And we said, listen, if we could get a 10-minute lull, we can have this job all done and taken care of. And we would be grateful and all of, like you say, be polite, especially with elementals, because being a sailor, I know what water can do. Being a fireman, I know what fire can do. So I tend to be as respectful as I can of those energies, as if they were an old one.
Yeah.
And in this particular context, the breeze settled right down for us, and we were able to put the awning up with a minimum of fuss and no Band-Aids or anything needed. So that's just a simple little ask the wind to help kind of magic.
Yes, or at least die down so that you can get stuff done. Could you blow somewhere else for about 10 minutes? Yes.
Right.
No, I agree about the not necessarily destructive. I don't think the elements themselves are destructive on purpose. It's part of their function sometimes when you talk about fire.
It's interesting that you say that, and it was probably the way of my language, but I don't actually consider hurricanes or tornadoes or tsunamis or fires for their destructive element. I actually see them being a force that is so far beyond us that what they are actually doing is clearing for new creation to happen.
Thank you. I agree.
It's just sort of the positive spin that I've always tried when I could to put on those sort of natural influences is, the forest has to burn down so that we get good, healthy forest.
It's like redwoods. They don't propagate. Their seeds don't drop and they don't sprout unless they've been through a forest fire.
Sure.
And those trees have been around a long time.
And historically, places that have had periodic floods over and over have the most fertile soils, and that's where we grow the best food. So, yeah, I try to bias elemental effects, I guess I should call it. I try to balance them in a way that seems positive or at least benign.
Yeah, as much as we can. And part of it is I think people see them as destructive because man has built their own structures and things that try to get in the way of tsunamis and
sure. Why do you have to come and break my artificial thing?
Yeah, exactly. So moving on, herbal magic may be the oldest form of magic known to humans, as herbs were originally and still are, quite frankly, used to heal. Each type of herb has its own magical properties and unique vibrations that it can use to enhance or create a spell. Herbs can be used to create incenses, just candles, make teas, salves, and tinctures, or even in cooking.
Sure, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Out of all of these, I find a little bit of this, but herbal magic, especially in my brain, in my mind, I hear herbal magic and medicine.
Mm-hmm.
To me, magic and medicine have such an overlap, especially on herbal, and coming from studying some Native American traditions and some naturistic traditions and whatnot. You're right. Herbs have been used for so long that I see them as both medicine and magic.
Mm-hmm.
But medicine in a more shamanist point of view, medicine is energy. It's juju. It's the impact that we use to manipulate to try to cause effect.
Which makes a great deal of sense. Do you know they had on the news the other day, they were studying orangutans somewhere, Borneo or somewhere where they're native. They actually came across an orangutan who had like a really deep gash on its face, and it went looking for a specific plant, chewed it, put it on its face, and covered it with another leaf.
I read that. Yeah. Actually, an active and pretty much airtight case for another primate understanding that there is herbal or medicinal benefit in the environment around us.
Exactly. So I just thought that was kind of cool to stick in there.
Sure.
So now, how long have we been doing it?
Right. Well, and before this recent, because I think I saw probably the similar article that you did, other cases we've seen where primates will go to salt water. They will actually leave a freshwater area and go to a shoreline where they can go to salt water and dip wounded limbs into it because they understand that salt water or saline is naturally going to be an astringent and naturally going to heal. Mm-hmm. So they even understand that there's a difference between the water that trickles down from the rainforest and the water that is found here where there are shells and crabs.
Yeah. So there you go.
All right. Imitative magic involves drawing, paintings, or creating your own types of artwork or symbols to make a physical form that demonstrates your desired result.
Mm-hmm. And I think the energy comes from the creative part process.
So give me some examples and some background where you use imitative magic. And I ask that simply because myself, I tend to see a lot of overlap between imitative and symbolic.
Okay, imitative for me is you're making your own stuff. So you're drawing, this is a very collage, for instance. You could a collage that is full of the colors you're using for your spell, or if you are trying to do a spell, I don't know, you need a car where you could put, different car part pictures on it, or, a car going down the road, or, some sort of transportation or whatever. You want to save money for a vacation. You could make a collage of where you want to go and use a lot of green with the idea that you're going to, have abundance in your life to make it so. And to me, imitative magic is where you are literally making something creative.
Drawing a picture or creating something that imitates or resembles the goal.
Yeah, exactly, in that respect. Or some sort of energy that you want to work with. I consider sigils almost a form of imitative magic.
Well, that was the next question I was going to ask is, most of us remember just from common culture, at least here in the West, that the artist formerly known as Prince, may he be peaceful and happy that we reference him because he was an incredible musician.
Yes, he was.
But he created that symbol that represented his identity and his purpose. Would you consider that being imitative magic in that it was something that he created to derive a goal?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Because we use, imitate it, and I don't know if imitative is necessarily the best word, but it's what we got.
Maybe representative.
Maybe representational. But
okay.
But if you come across, you're reading about different kinds of magic, that's the word they tend to use. But moving on to something a bit more simple to talk about, not magic.
No, it's not.
Well, no. All right. It involves using cords, threads, yarn, etc., twine, string. I'm a big fan of like the embroidery floss because I always have it around, and tying a specific number of knots while focusing on your spell. Enhancing the magic by using specific colored cords or tying items representing your intent into them makes it more powerful. The most traditional is like the witch's ladder. I know spells begun, etc., etc., etc. And it's famed that witches would sell sailors wind that they tied up in knots in a cord.
Right. So that if the sailors ran into the doldrums, they would be able to release those knots and summon. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Another kind of overlooked symbol, but something that people have used for centuries, is rosary.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, when Catholic practitioners are counting their beads and advancing their way along a circle as part of a ritual or a practice, they are performing a form of this same sort of magic.
Yeah, or Dicker beads if you're Muslim, where there's 99 of them because there's 100 names for Allah.
Okay. I am not familiar with those, but...
Your second husband was Muslim, so yes, I am.
Well, and not for nothing, wampum.
Same idea.
At one point, it was not magic, certainly.
No.
So, poppet magic involves filling a pouch that may or may not be shaped to resemble a person with various herbs, crystals, or other objects to cast a spell. It has often been associated with both beneficial and baneful magics. Is this a kind of magic that you use?
Not very often. Every once in a while, when my grandchildren were younger, I had a couple who suffered from nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
I made like a puppet that looked like them and put, herbs inside it that would encourage restful sleep.
Okay.
To them to sleep with at night.
Sure.
Here's a doll to, here's almost like a teddy bear kind of thing.
Right.
Or tuck it under their pillow.
Well, and that was going to be one of the examples that I used is when my friend who's on the road so much was going through some lonelies, I got a little teddy bear that sort of reminded her of me, and she keeps that on the road with her. And in a way, it's a form of puppet magic in that it's something that represents. I don't very often physically make puppets, but what I do more often than I realized is a lot of times I'll draw the outline of a person on a piece of paper. I jokingly refer to it as the chalk outline, but anyway, I'll draw an outline like that on a piece of paper and then set either stones or herbs or draw sigils or what have you within that boundary, or sometimes outside the boundary, pointing in or pointing out as a way to assist in either adding characteristics to a person or removing illnesses. Right now, I have a kind of a outline of a stick figure that's upstairs on my altar that I've been putting a lot of different healing representations on, and I have an arrow out with a representative for some of my gastro issues, and I have an arrow out for some of my cardiac issues, and I have arrows in with symbol FE for more iron. And so I sort of just do the chalk outline version of Poppet Magic, but I think it's still the same concept.
I think so. All I can think of when you said chalk figure is the traditional gingerbread cookie cutter.
Right.
Around. Yeah, it's the same idea.
Sure.
But, I mean, and it doesn't even have to be a lot of people traditionally associate it with being shaped like a person, but it doesn't have to be. And just to put it aside, the most common baneful association I think people think of is like voodoo dolls where you're sticking the pins.
Right.
That's not our tradition, so I'm not trying to be, sarcastic or anything, but unfortunately popular culture has kind of stuck that one in people's minds.
Sure. Well, again, and I've said this before in my own practice, I've come to a point where I do the best that I can to perform my magic on me and not on others.
Other people. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Okay, now, symbolic magic is the use of anything that can represent your need or goal to signal to the universe what you are trying to accomplish. Symbols can include pictures, tarot cards, or actual items. See, this is where there's that kind of overlap that you thought with representational or imitative magic. Symbolic magic is I find something that looks like it, or like a tarot card, or a rock, or a picture out of a magazine, or a toy car. If I'm trying to you were talking about manifesting a car earlier. I find something that symbolically represents what I'm trying to accomplish, or looks like it in the case of the car. I don't make that. I just go looking for it.
Boy, I've done that one without realizing or seeing it that way, but I've done that one for decades in that when I'm trying to manifest a new toy, say, for example, a new guitar amplifier.
Yep.
Or a new power tool or something like that. Yeah, I will go and find it in a magazine or find some way that I can get its image. And now that I think about it, what you're referring to as symbolic magic in all practice in Dave's life would be what I refer to as refrigerator magic, in that get a picture of the amplifier or the car or the bike or the laptop or whatever the thing is that you want. Get a picture of it, put it someplace where you are going to look at it several times a day and continue to reinforce that. So symbolic magic to me is sort of fridge magic.
Okay, or fridge magnet magic because you're.
Well, yeah, I was trying not to.
but you get the distinction.
Yes, I do.
Energy into the symbol to use it, but you didn't make the symbol in the first place.
Right. It isn't a creation of my own. It is a representation that I have found.
Yes, exactly.
So symbolic versus imitative makes sense to me now.
Oh, good. Okay. And last but not least,
talismans and amulets magic uses small items that can be charged and carried or worn as jewelry to draw desired energy or things that you need to you. They have been traditionally associated with protection.
Like the hand of Fatima that people wore to protect from the evil eye.
Well, yep, absolutely. or in different contexts, the evil eye for other types of protection. Yeah. I generally wear usually my little piece of temple, and I have a pent on my usual paracord, but I have the little springy coily things that have whatever stone that you and I are working with often that I carry.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, yeah, I'm always adding to and and cleansing from that necklace that I wear around me, or when I'm conducting ritual, a lot of times I'll wear stone bracelets that have little attachments where I can add things. So those are sort of like a form of vestment for me, in that I can wear the particular stone or the particular correspondence, whether it's, herbs or what have you. If I can be wearing that and having it as part of my person when I'm working the magic, to me, that adds strength to my magic.
I think it does too. But I mean, and to finish it off, as we say it in our book, most witches find they gravitate towards one or more types of magic as their go-tos when crafting and performing spells. We all have our personal favorites. You know that, and I know that. However, just because a particular type may be more difficult to work with, at least initially, it may be the one that could be most effective for a particular spell. So it should always be considered before you move on to something simpler and easier, is how I think about it.
Well, and it's interesting for me because looking down the list, if you had to ask me a favorite or a go-to, for me, it's all about context.
Yes,
I have a different favorite or a different use for each of these different kind. For example, candle magic, 90% of the time when I'm lighting a candle and trying to do that, it is for remote healing for someone that I love or care about, or it is in remembrance of someone that I love or care about. And that doesn't mean that it needs to be that way for anybody out there. It just happens to be for me. When I find someone that is ill, I say, candles are lit for you. And for me, I tend to use candle magic the most for healing. I tend to use, as we discussed, refrigerator or symbolic magic the most for manifesting. I tend to use sigil or imitative magic an awful lot for protection and defense. For example, when I leave my house or when I want my bike to be safe. So for me, I guess I use almost all of these. It's simply different ones for different purposes.
Oh, I know. My favorite, as we've discussed multiple times, is a rock.
Sure.
Because I can carry it with me, unlike a candle, which, like you said, tends to be for somebody else or for attracting something to me. To me, because I think I've been practicing magic a while, longer than I care to admit, sometimes the stuff I want tends to take longer to manifest than, say, burning down a candle would.
Certainly, sure.
Yeah, I tend to be more invested in long-term projects nowadays.
Well, that brings up another thing, too, where when we use candles for manifesting, when we get the object, do we then burn a candle to close that magic? And some people do and some people don't. But I like to, when I have received that object or whatever, there's some ritual form that I will use to close out, either the picture of the bike on the fridge or whatever. That picture can go to sacred burn. But I like to, when I have successfully closed a loop, as it were, on magic, I like to perform a momentary little closing of that.
Oh, I do too. I think, it's like we say somehow to be, when we're done with the actual spell, that's the symbol to the universe that, okay, you go do your thing.
Right.
And it seems kind of unappreciative when we get whatever that result is, not to acknowledge that the universe answered us.
Right. That's exactly what I was. Exactly what I was mentioning.
It's like when we work with an element and we are polite. I think the universe is a lot bigger than the element we're working with. And personally, I've been hit over the head enough times with cosmic 2x4 when it wants my attention to be aware it's got that energy there.
Well, something else that I was just going to mention, because it ties in with most of these, but if I am trying to draw a physical object to me, and I'm going back to the bicycle or the car or the toolkit or whatever that I'm trying to manifest, I find it funny that when I talk to people, there's often something that they have done on their altar that they will keep active on their altar while that spell is manifesting. but I find very few people that do what I do, in that I have an empty plate somewhere on my altar. I have a place that is specifically empty and stays empty because that is the space that I have made in my universe by a body, mind, and spirit. That is the space that I am holding for this manifestation to come to. And so when I am able to successfully manifest, here again, there's a ritual that I do to fill that plate and be able to not carry that empty plate. It also gives me an idea sometimes when I look at my altar and I see 4 or 5 different empty plates. I know these are all different things that I am manifesting. And in some cases, that's a visual reminder to me that maybe I am trying to manifest in too many directions at once. And so for me, it becomes a way to see how many of those open loops I have.
Yeah, and sometimes we need to kind of focus our intent a little better.
Sure.
Exactly. So I would agree with that. Well, that was fun and a lot longer than one of our usual practice segments. But
it really got into the way that we use combinations of these two, and that was kind of part of my intention when we started doing practices. Is, like we jokingly said, when somebody says, "How do you do what you do?" This is what we do when we do what we do.
Which makes perfect sense. So as we like to close things out, I say, may you find mirth and reverence in all things.
I am grateful to be back and hearing you say that. Please, everyone, be safe, be kind, and be loved.
Before we go, we would like to present you with a tip or trick or witchy hint, just something to make your day go better, because we live in a mixture of the magical and the mundane.
For this episode, our tip, trick, or witchy hint is about how to prescribe some magic with your medicine. After a recent hospital stay, I want to share with you a bit of an aha moment that I had and how I'm using it to help build alignment and synergy with the medicines that I'm prescribed to take. If you've never been in a hospital for more than an overnight, first off, you're very fortunate, and you may not have experienced this, but after a few days, there arises a particular rhythm or routine to each of the days spent either in testing or in evaluation or hopefully recovering and regaining strength. Those of us who have been there, we know the drill. The phlebotomist coming in to draw a fresh blood sample at 4:30 in the morning and in the afternoon. The patient care technicians visiting us every 4 hours to take our vitals. Blood pressure, check. Pulse, oximetry, check. Temperature, mental alertness, check, etc. The service folks who bring a meal that is meant to be regular times and gratefully handle things like the trash and the laundry for us. And nurses who make their own form of rounds to assess progress, understand our pain levels, and serve often as a conduit to the on-call doctor. For as unstructured as we patients are required to be, lay there. Yet keep laying there. Just lay there. The care staff has a very definite pattern and rotation that becomes familiar, almost comforting after a couple of days. So it was one morning at 4:30 a.m. when the kind nurse came in to draw a fresh blood sample. And I rolled over and said, sort of half asleep, "Okay, time for the pokey in the arm ritual. Rubber band around the arm. Wait." I almost disturbed the poor human being when I sat up bolt upright out of a sleep and came instantly awake. The pokey in the arm ritual. These are rituals. I just had that thought. These are rituals. The ones who come get my vitals, they perform a ritual over me with their magical equipment. The ones who draw my blood, there is a ritual that they're working. Even the surgeon who performed both the testing and ultimately the fixing, his was a ritual like no other. So here's what I realized at that precise moment. When they bring me my morning medicines and check each one carefully against the list, they're doing a ritual. They're doing this ritual to help make sure that I get the right doses and the right medicines at the right times. I can help, By considering the solemn act of them providing what I need carefully each day, I can whisper a little prayer or a mantra or a spell over the silly little plastic cup of water that I take the meds with. I can bless each needle and the technician attached before it draws blood. Bless it that it will get a clean, healthy sample, and then, of course, that it will not cause any harm to my veins or my arteries. I can best bless the portable blood pressure machine, not only that it gets a good reading for me, but that it might just be the exact instrument at the right time that might catch a potentially fatal condition on someone else later on in the day and save them just in the nick of time. Blessed blood pressure machine. I can bless the discharge staff and wish them well, that they heal others, and by doing that, I heal myself even more. These are all just a handful of literally dozens of little mini rituals that I observed and discovered while I was in the hospital, and I started to add my own energy to them. I guess my point is, I could just lay there. I could even grumble or gripe about all the silly mundane things like food and rules and visiting hours. Or I can imagine and hold sacred space when each little ritual arrives to be performed on me. I can be positive not only to myself, but to the staff. I can still add my magic to make a difference, even if I am just laying there. So even if you're not bedbound and going about each day, you'll likely take some medicines or supplements regularly each morning. We all have our rituals. So bless your meds. Bless the medicines. Add magic into your healing whenever possible. If our energy is aligned with the medications that we are using, it must certainly follow that they should be more effective. I dearly hope that you like and enjoy the content that Elizabeth and I create. Please know that we adore knowing that you're out there, and we appreciate the energy that you send. For now, be safe, be kind, and be loved.
Well, it looks like the coffee cups are empty for this week. We hope you join us again next Tuesday, but you can find us at our website, 2youngcrones.com. That's the number 2, Young Crones.
We'd love to have you join our growing online Discord community. Check out our new Patreon presence. Just look for Young Crones Cafe. Through Patreon, you'll be able to make it to our Discord. We are also Young Crones Cafe on Twitter and Facebook.
Until then, remember, we are witches who work with energies to effect change.
We are believers in both immanent and transcendent divine.
We are celebrants of the passage of the solar and lunar cycles.
We are hedge walkers who pass back and forth between the worlds of the magical and the mundane.
We are seekers of knowledge.
And we are walkers of a spiritual tradition we call the Path.
So mote it be.
So mote it be.